Welcome to Roll, Ponder, and Play, a podcast dedicated to crafting stories through the application of role-playing game engines, combined with creative thinking and propelled into the ether by the barest of prompts. I'm Jared Hess, taking on all the roles of Game Master, Solo Player, Author, and Narrator. Come with me on a journey, and together let us explore realms of shadow, danger, and wonder. One role can decide the fate of many things. Welcome to episode 2 of the Queen of Shadows podcast on Roll, Ponder, and Play. I'm Jared Hess, your friendly neighborhood game master, solo player, author, and narrator. In our previous episode, Eilwen, her twin brother Aron, both 18 years old, find out their father and Chief Mabon have not returned from their morning hunt. Eilwen vows to find them, and she and Aron gather supplies in preparation. Before they can set out, however, a huge silverback bear enters Frostbridge, hoping for an easy meal. In the ensuing fight, 2 members of the community are slain by the bear, before it retreats into the snowy wilderness of the Veiled Mountains. Eilwen and Aron continue their preparations and overhear conversations between the dark-hearted Belvan and his cronies, talking ill about their family and planning something nefarious. Eilwen decides to do something about Belvan once they find their father. She takes the finely wrought box with the crown and its strange iron discs and brings it with them. Discs she doesn't reveal to Aron, discs her mother taught her to read. As we begin this episode, Eilwen's stats are Edge 2, Heart 1, Iron 1, Shadow 3, Wits 2. Current assets: Archer, initial box; Cutthroat, initial box; Shadow Walk, initial box. Current statuses: Supply 5 out of 5, Spirit 5 out of 5, Health 4 out of 5, Momentum 4 out of 10. Current debilities: none. And now, on to episode 2 of Queen of Shadows. They moved through the snow and wind towards the eastern side of Frostbridge. "We need to move quickly. What if Father is hurt?" Eilwen said, and she couldn't hide the worry that tinged her voice. She blinked up at the sky laden with falling snow and shook her head. "That'll be difficult in all this weather," Aron muttered. "We'll need horses," Eilwen said. "Or dogs," Aron suggested. "Or dogs and sleds," she agreed. "What about Tristan?" "It's worth a try," Aron shrugged, looking at the snow-packed mountains. He shifted his pack. "He's got the strongest hounds, but there's a reason he lives all by himself. Either way, we'd better hurry before the weather gets worse." Eilwen led the way to Tristan's home. Tristan, a hulking man, turned as they approached, holding a whining dog in his arms. The dog licked his face and scrabbled in his grasp, wanting to be set down. Flakes of snow contrasted against the fiery color of Tristan's shaggy hair and beard. He squinted at them as they approached, and set the dog down, patting it on its head. Other hounds barked and snapped at their approach, more playful than anything, but Eilwen knew that a single command from Tristan could easily change that. "And what's this?" Tristan blinked against the falling snow. "Tristan, we would seek a boon of you," Eilwen said. She saw a few sleds in various states of repair. The wood on some showed severe weathering and bowing. Others were in better shape, stacked under a canopy made of furs and imported canvas from the Southlands. "We need your help," she continued. "You may have heard that our father and Mabon have not returned from the hunt. We mean to find them. But we need to borrow some hounds and a sled, if you're willing." The silence stretched. When he didn't speak, she looked at Aron. "They might be hurt or freezing to death," Aron added. "Besides, this settlement needs Mabon. You know the quality of man that he is." So this is going to be a compel roll. When you attempt to persuade someone to do something, envision your approach and roll. And we are going to be using charm. So if you charm, pacify, barter, or convince, roll plus heart, add +1 if you share a bond. So she does have a bond with the village, so we use that here. So that will be a total of 2 for her roll. And she rolls a 2. +2 is 4 on the action dice. Not a great roll. The challenge dice next come up as 3 and 3. Right on. So the 4 beats the individual 3s. That's a strong success. She gets +1 momentum for a total of 5 now. And one important thing about those doubles that we get on the challenge dice is that they introduce some kind of twist. And since the numbers are low and the action result exceeded both of them, it's a positive twist.
"Fine," Dristan muttered. "I like Mabon, and you're right, he's a good man and the best chief we could have right now. I guess I'll let you use the mutts. Just be sure you bring 'em all back, or you'll be paying for it with sweat work, you hear?"
Eilwen and Aron nodded their agreement and began putting their supplies on the sleds. Dristan helped them harness the dogs, then he scratched and petted each animal, whispering to them as if they were his children. They licked his face and yapped at him excitedly whenever he passed. Finally he came back, scratching at his chin deep within his beard.
"I've been thinking. I think I'll just come with you. The dogs, you see, they know me well, and I wouldn't want them getting upset working with other folk. Not that you couldn't do it, you understand. It's just, I'd just feel better if I came along with you."
So what is Dristan like? I'm going to use, it'd be similar to the action theme Oracle in Ironsworn, but it's an Oracle on RPG Solo, and I get majestically odd and bleakly rustic. So from those descriptors, this is what I think. Eilwen and Aron looked at each other. Dristan didn't have a family. Things were bleak for him ever since his wife and children died to a wolf attack. Ever since, he had raised dogs and lived on the edge of the settlement. He traded pelts and ore on his sleds with Frostbridge and some other nearby encampments. As a loner, many viewed him as an oddity there, living alone in rustic solitude. Dristan gathered up his own supplies, adding a 3rd sled to the mix. So him coming along is the narrative twist that I'm adding in. And it's a positive twist because it adds an additional person to their party, which will help in things like combat or things like that. The trio set out, moving south across the namesake of Frostbridge, a bridge made of ice that crossed over a deep chasm. Ragged stones and jagged ice jutted out around them. Moving over it, they peered down into the seeming bottomless depths. Fog hung in the depths of blue-gray, snow swirled about them. They moved over to another crag with a winding path to a neighboring mountain, where they had gone to hunt. So I won't make an undertake a journey move yet, because her father and Mabon haven't really gone all that far, I think. Blinding snow and the coming darkness slowed them some. Thankfully, the falling snow at least lit up the world, and after a couple of hours, they made it to where her father and Mabon had gone hunting. Only, and here we enter the complication from the previous miss, only, "They're not here," Aron said, looking around as the dogs sniffed the air, their breath creating small wreaths of fog. The canines blinked snow out of their eyes and panted. Aron shook the snow off his hood and peered around in the growing gloom. Dust began to settle in. "Help me look for tracks. Anything," Eilwen said. She hopped off her sled into the deep snow. It crunched beneath her feet as she waded through it. Her leather pants, boots, and tunic had been treated with oil so it didn't penetrate to her skin.
Snow also gathered on her bare skin furs. She looked for tracks or some other signs of her father's passing. Tristan watched over the dogs and sleds while the other two searched. So we're going to do a gather information roll here, or gather information move. When you search an area, ask questions, conduct an investigation, or follow a track, roll plus wits. If you act within a community or ask questions of a person with whom you share a bond, add +1. And on a strong hit, we get something helpful and specific. So what do we get? We roll a 4 on the action dice with a +2 for wits for a total of 6. Compared against a 7 and a 4 on the challenge dice, that is a weak hit. So we get +1 momentum. Total momentum is now 4. I can't see anything, Aron muttered as the wind blew snow into his face. It's getting hard to see, Tristan agreed, the snow collecting on his reddish beard. Over here, Eilwen said. There, under an overhang of rock, protected from the snow somehow, she saw boot prints. One set looked about her father's size, and there in the snow she saw her father's spear. It had been broken. And what's this? Blood on the rocks and snow? A fight then. And she saw more tracks leading to the south. Okay, so are there any bodies? We're going to ask the RPG Solo Oracle, and we get a somewhat likely for no. Has any in their trio heard of raiders? This one will be somewhat unlikely, and we also roll a 2 and get a no. Are the tracks human? I'll say that's likely, and with a roll of a 10, we get a yes and. So I think that means there was a sizable number of them, easily more than just 2 hunters, more than Mabon and her father could handle. Is there any indication of who did this? On a 50-50, no and. There was a fight, Aron said, tapping the blood on the frozen snow. It was ice. It's hard to say, but this could have happened hours ago. Tristan, he asked, who would do this?
I don't know, lad, Tristan muttered and scratched at his beard while absently pulling gently on a dog's ear.
I never get raiders up here, down in the lowlands, sure. I've done some trading down there many years back, but the folk there are strange, lowlanders.
Did they have any sleds or any sort of mounts? I'll say that's somewhat likely, but the oracle says no. Do the tracks lead in the direction of the settlement? I'll say that's likely, in the direction of a settlement. And we get a yes. For the past year and a half, I've been playing one of the best AI TTRPG platforms out there, Friends and Fables. Friends and Fables uses the popular 5e mechanics, and I love that I can build and play within any world and any genre. My medieval fantasy world, Isle of Unays, is one of the featured worlds. I created it from a random map generator, and from there I built up the areas, cities, towns, and other points of interest from the ground up. And with Friends and Fables AI-assisted world builder tools getting some love, world building is only getting easier. I've also enjoyed many hours of solo role-playing in my own world with Franz, the AI Game Master. He's thrown my fighter character into competitions, festivals, relationships, court intrigue, not to mention battles on fully AI-generated 2D battle maps built entirely from scene details. I'm now level 5, and while trying to sneak past an invading army of Northmen, my party got stuck in a dilapidated barn fighting off ravening ghouls. I'm not sure we're going to survive the night. If Franz does hand us a TPK, well, at least there are over 1,000 other worlds out there for me to play in. You too can get in on the action at fables.gg. That's Friends and Fables, located at fables.gg.
They weren't riding mounts, and they're heading south, Aron said. That means they could have come from Rock River. So that's a generated name. What do we know about Rock River? Let's ask the Oracle chart in the PDF. It gives me small and cold. So sounds like any settlement in the Veiled Mountains. an out-of-the-way settlement with few inhabitants. Or they're at least heading there, Eilwen nodded, climbing back atop her sled and clucking to the dogs. Then we follow. With a hiss of the runners, they headed toward Rock River. Okay, so now we're going to undertake a journey. So I'll say this is a troublesome journey. We're still within the same region as the Veiled Mountains, and Rock River isn't terribly far away. When you travel across hazardous or unfamiliar lands, first determine the rank of your journey. Ask the Oracle if unsure. So we're choosing troublesome. That means we fill in 3 boxes whenever we make progress. And on each segment of our journey, we roll plus wits. And if we're setting off from a community that we share a bond with, we get to add +1 on the initial roll. On a strong hit, you reach a waypoint. If the waypoint is unknown to you, envision it, then choose 1. You make good use of progress, mark progress. You move at speed, mark progress and take +1 momentum, but suffer -1 supply. On a weak hit, you reach a waypoint and mark progress, but suffer -1 supply. And on a miss, you're waylaid by a perilous event. So since we are originating from Frostbridge, she will get a +1. So that's a d6 +2 wits plus the 1 add. And we get a 6 on the action dice with a +3 for a total of 9 versus 7 and 2 on the challenge dice for a strong hit. So I choose to lose a supply and gain extra progress. And that means we progress along at a total of 4 out of 10 boxes, so pretty good. And our supply goes down by 1, and we now have 4 supply out of 5. They travel hard for several hours, pushing the dogs, and they arrived at the Stone Tree, a landmark where a cliff jutted out at an angle above them. Using the pretense of using the privy, Eilwen hid the box with the crown and the metal discs inside a cleft in one of the walls and covered the spot with some rocks. She memorized the location to retrieve the items if needed later. They continue their journey towards Rock River, the trail cutting across some wide-open swaths on the side of a basin. So we undertake a journey again, and I roll a 1 this time with a +2 for a total of 3 versus a 10 and a 6 on the challenge dice. That is a miss. We are waylaid by a perilous event. To their left, the trail drove off sharply in elevation. In the summer, this place would be fields of shale and boulders, but now all that was covered in several feet of snow. Trees dotted the ridgeline far above them, and cliffs laden with heavy ice and snow overhung the open area. The snow fell in heavy flakes. The easterly wind had nearly stopped being blocked by the peaks on their right. They jumped at a loud cracking sound high above them, and the dogs began to whine, their ears flattening. Through the falling snow, Eilwen saw a huge section of ice and rock that broke off near the top of the ridge and plummeted into the drifts of snow. There came a gusting of wind and a rumbling sound that grew louder. "Avalanche!" she shouted, and Aron cursed. Eilwen, in the lead, pointed to where the trail cut around an outcropping of rock that formed a sheltered overhang. If they could just reach that in time. "Shelter! There!" She lashed the dogs, and they set out, Aron and Dristan close behind. Far above them and behind them to their right, a mountain of white was about to consume them. So this is face danger using wits to urge and speed the dogs along, yet to do so with enough expertise to stay on the trail. This speed is determined on how well they can guide the dogs, I'm going to say. Okay, so we get a 6 on the action dice with a +2 for a total of 8 versus a 4 and a 9 on the challenge dice for a weak hit. So I'll say we are delayed. That's -1 momentum due to all the new snow they'll have to dig out from. They barely made it in time. Skimming around the curve, their sleds nearly crashing into each other as they careened into the safety of the protective overhang. The wave of snow crashed in around them, shooting off above them, trees and boulders tumbling over it and off the ledge to their left. The dogs, frightened by the noise, whined and bit each other until Dristan managed to calm them. When it was over, snow was piled up around them chest high. But they were alive. It'd take time to dig out and get back on the trail. They decided to make the best of it. The wall of snow around them and the overhang above them did offer a sort of natural shelter now. Realizing that speed was lost and that they'd make no progress toward Rock River, they settled in for the night. So we're going to do a make camp, and when you rest and recover for several hours in the wild, roll plus supply. On a strong hit, you and your allies may each choose 2. On a weak hit, choose 1. So we get to choose some options. Let's see what we get first of all. So our supply is sitting at 4 currently, so that's what we're going to be rolling. So we get a 5 on the action dice, add 4, that's a total of 9, versus 4 and 5 on the challenge dice. So a strong hit. So I'm going to choose to recuperate, take +1 health, and then also to prepare. When you break camp, add +1 to undertake a journey. They organized their supplies and prepared for the morrow. Then they wrapped their heavy bearskin cloaks about them and cut down some pine branches nearby. These they lay on the ground. They put more pine branches above them and then snuggled up close to the dogs. In that manner they achieved some warmth so as not to perish, and slept until dawn. When dawn stretched forth her fingertips of rose, their impromptu campsite made miniature mounds under a couple of feet of snow, and beams of orange light coming over the eastern peak awakened them. As they pushed aside the branches and shook off the snow, the clouds were still about, and Eilwen knew that the weather could change upon her breath, but for the moment, the sun greeted them. Her shoulder, where the bear had slashed her, felt better too as she tested it. They continued the journey with Eilwen again in the lead. So we undertake a journey again, and we get a 4 on the action dice, add on our +3, so +2 from wits, plus the 1 bonus we got, for a total of 7, versus a 4 and a 10 on the challenge dice, so a weak hit. Journey progress is now 7 out of 10 boxes. It took longer than they thought to dig out and break camp, but around noon they set out, and by late afternoon the trail passed through the very eastern tip of the Green Grip. The Green Grip was a swath of forest that clung to these frosty peaks with tenacity. It stretched down into a basin far below them and ran the entire breadth of the valley, like a long green ribbon reaching into the distance. They ate their rations and told tall tales of the Green Grip. So what tales have they heard about this place? I'm going to roll on an oracle chart, and I get ancient. Dristan told them how it was rumored that the trees find purchase here because of some ancient magic in their depths. He said that some storytellers said that there were ancient mounds within the heart of the Green Grip. What were they? Perhaps old burial tombs, perhaps hills of bones from some lost battle. Other storytellers thought the mounds were the domes of a buried city that was here before even the peaks rose at the behest of the gods. With the forest so close by, Eilwen decided to try and shore up their supplies. They probably had enough supplies to reach Rock River, but it didn't hurt to be safe. She headed down into the forest, looking for game. Behind her, Aron and Dristan set up camp near the trail and fed the dogs. So I'm not sure if she's been here before. Let's ask the oracle. On a somewhat likely, we get a yes and. She's traveled this route to Rock River before with her father, not often, but once or twice since her 12th birthday they had camped in the edge of these woods. She didn't believe the stories, but it was true that she had never ventured into the heart of the forest. She remembered her camping spot where some game would go for food, where winter berries grew, and where the snows melted in the spring and formed a quick-flowing brook where silver-breast trout twisted in the waves. With bow and knife and a few other supplies, she set out to hunt while Aron and Dristan made camp. So this is the resupply move when you hunt, forage, or scavenge, roll plus wits. So we will roll. And we get a 3 on the action dice with +2 wits for a total of 5 versus an 8 and a 4, which is a miss. I'll roll on the pay a price move table. Now, some of you may have caught this, but that was technically a weak hit, since the 5 beats the 4 and not the 8, but I missed it when I first wrote this all up, so the story moves forward as if it were a miss. And I actually like how it turned out. Let's continue. Forward as it stands, no retroactive fixes here. You are separated from something or someone. So I rolled that on the oracle table, the pay the price table. So how was I separated from someone or something? I will reveal that later. Confident that she could find the hunting ground she remembered, Eilwen set out at a brisk pace, her braid bouncing from left to right as she trotted down the slope that was covered with the smell of fresh pine needles and cold snow. She remembered fondly shooting a rabbit here with her father when she was a young girl. With pine trees about, she descended an elevation, her bow out, looking for any sign of game. The sky had turned leaden gray, and small flakes of snow began to fall through the pines. The pines were already laden with icy snow, and now more piled on. The branches bowed under the weight. She had better find some game quickly. She entered a clearing, scanning it. Nothing, only she raised her bow, setting an arrow to the string and aiming. She had caught motion and saw a figure standing on the other side of the clearing, just under the trees which overshadowed it. A boulder sat to the figure's left, the darkened tree line casting heavy shadows, but she could swear it looked at her. "Who are you?" she demanded. The figure said nothing, but she could feel eyes on her, not malevolent, just curious, watching. She couldn't make out its features, as it stood too much in the shadow of the trees, but it looked tall and slender. It turned its head and watched her as she carefully moved behind a tree for possible cover and kept the arrow trained on the figure. The figure said nothing, nor did it seem alarmed or concerned. It turned in a small rustle of undergrowth and disappeared among the trees. Who was that? Should she follow? Curiosity warred with her, but she decided it would be better to go back before the others started to worry. She turned around to leave. Then she cursed, raising her bow again and turning in a slow circle, her heart beating in her chest. The game trail she had followed was gone. Pine needles and snow and fallen branches that she swore had not been there before now obliterated even her tracks. Trees had somehow shifted their position, and she couldn't see any of the landmarks she had pursued to reach this far. A slight gust of wind kicked up pine needles in an eerie twisting circle. "What sorcery is this?" she whispered to the mute boulders and trees. The wind moaned, in seemingly sorrowful keen. "Hello," she called out. "Aron? Tristan?" On the wind she heard the cawing of a bird, but there was no reply from her companions, and she was probably too far away from them to hear her anyway. She felt a sense of despair. She was lost, and she had left much of her supplies with the others. The way behind her was blocked. With a low curse, she darted in the only direction she could think of that might get her back to her brother, deeper into the forest and after the retreating figure.
Thank you for joining us, and I sincerely hope you enjoyed what you experienced. If you would like to support Roll, Ponder, and Play, you can do so by joining my Patreon at patreon.com/rollponderandplay. There you can also find transcripts, show notes, and other projects I'm involved in. If you would like to reach out to me, you can find me on Patreon or on Discord at Roll, Ponder, and Play, or by email at rollponderandplay@gmail.com. Until we meet again, may your own dice rolls ever bring you success.